Hi, welcome to part 1 of my 1979 Suzuki GS550 cafe racer project. This is a bike I bought a couple of months ago. It's a great looking bike and somebody's done an amazing job of the original design. However, as it stands today, it's got lots of issues. Over the next few months, I'm going to be fully stripping down the bike and rebuilding it. So if you'd like to follow me on that journey, then please click on the subscribe button to get access to regular video updates. In today's video, we're going to have a walk around the bike. I'm going to show you some of those issues, and then when I finish the project, I'm going to come back to this video to show you what the bike looks like today versus the finished build. So when I first got the bike home, I took it up the road, and when I got back, I noticed that there's some oil leaking from the fork seals on both sides, and the suspension felt spongy. So I'm going to strip down the forks and rebuild with new seals, oil and possibly springs. The fork sliders have been polished, but they've still got a lot of the casting marks, so I'm going to polish these up to a mirror finish. The brake calipers on the front and rear are corroded, so I'm going to remove them, strip them down, get them shot blasted and most probably Cerakote them. I'll then rebuild them using new seals and possibly pistons. Someone's made the front mudguard, but the welds aren't great, and there are also some marks in the aluminium where they've filed the welds down, so I'll need to sort this. And once that's done, I'll then polish the mudguard up to a mirror finish. On the rear of the front mudguard, there's some wear, which has been caused by the brake hose rubbing on it, and this is because there isn't a retainer for the hose. The bottom yoke's powder coated, and there are signs of corrosion on the yoke and the bolts. I'll strip off the powder coat and see what condition the yoke's in. If it's decent, I may polish it up and Cerakote it, but if not, I'll probably replace it with a good second-hand one. The switch cluster on the left handlebar has these two buttons wired up to the control unit, one for the left indicator, the other for the right. You've then got these other two switches, one for the horn and the other for the headlight. The headlight only has full beam, so I'm going to be modifying the wiring loom so the dipped headlights is on with the ignition and the switch is used to turn full beam on and off. Looking at the headlight, you can see these spacers, and if we zoom in, we can actually see that they're large nylock nuts. So I'm going to replace the nuts with some proper spacers, which I'll most likely make on the lathe. Even though the switch cluster is wired up for the indicators, and there are what appears to be mounting holes in the headlight bracket for indicators, there aren't any fitted to the front or rear of the bike. Now personally, I don't feel comfortable riding the bike on the road without them, so I'll be fitting indicators to the front and rear of the bike. We have this issue here with the brake hose. Now, I'm not sure if you can see this on the video, but the brake pipe has been crushed, and it's been crushed between the bottom yoke here and the frame as it's been turned on full left lock. So this needs a retainer to hold the hose out the way. Another issue with full left lock is that there's this fuel gauge fitted on the left hand side of the fuel tank, but when I turn the handlebars on full left lock, the switch cluster hits the fuel gauge, so to stop this I'll probably modify the lock stop on the yoke or frame. Here we have the mechanical tacho, which works absolutely fine. Then there's the mechanical speedo, which is driven off the gearbox fitted to the front wheel but displays the incorrect speed. There's the bracket here that someone's made to mount the gauges, but it's not square, so the gauges have a slight angle when you're looking down. I've already decided that I'm going to replace both the mechanical gauges with a single electronic one and make a new bracket. There's lots of corrosion on the filler cap, so it's likely I'll just replace this with a new one. Then there's the exhaust, which I think is leaking. Someone's also used different types of bolts, so I'm going to replace the bolts so they're all the same. Oil leaks, yes, plenty of. And when I bought the bike, there were no signs of oil leaks, but having got it home and given it a run up the road, I got back and found oil all over my boots and the tyre. So the engine I'm going to remove, fully strip it down and rebuild it. Someone's attempted to polish the left engine cover, but it's still got a lot of casting marks in it. It's also got some damage. I'm going to see if I can resolve the damage and give polishing a go, but I may need to end up replacing it with a good second-hand one. Someone's gone to the effort of filing down the shift rod, but I'm not exactly sure why, because it doesn't catch on anything. So I'll either make a new one or buy one to replace it with. The rear brake switch is not currently functioning. It should have a steel spring with one end fitted to the brake pedal assembly and the other end fitted to the brake switch. When the rear brake pedal is pressed down, it should pull the spring down, which pulls the plunger on the switch, closing the circuit and turning the rear brake light on. It's also been mounted on this nut which is welded to the frame, and because the wiring is hardwired into the loom, it means that any adjustment by turning some threads on the switch means the wiring ends up twisted. I'm either going to change the mount or fit a different type of switch. I'm also going to be building a new loom, so all of this wiring will be tidied up. Carbs are fitted with pod filters, they're leaking fuel and the bike isn't running properly, so the carbs need to come off and be stripped down to see what the problem is. The brake reservoir is mounted on this bracket on the frame, but the weld isn't great, so I'm going to cut it off and weld a new one on. The reservoir is also leaking brake fluid, so when I took the bike up the road and got back, I had brake fluid all over the rear wheel and the frame, and it looks like it's been leaking for a while because there's also some corrosion on the lower part of the frame. The rear brake master cylinder or pedal assembly is seized up, so I'm going to remove this and strip it down to see what the problem is. The ignition switch is mounted here, just underneath the front of the seat. I'm thinking of making a housing for the switch that sits under here, and there's also this exposed wiring to deal with. That's all going to be replaced with a nice new wiring loom. This piece of frame near the foot peg has been cut and left open. I'm going to weld a piece of metal over the opening to stop any water and grime getting inside, otherwise it could lead to corrosion from the inside of the frame. Here we have an engine mount that's been welded, but the quality of the weld is quite poor. Once the frame's been shot blasted, I'll grind this off and re-weld it. Original foot pegs are super comfortable when riding the bike but don't look great aesthetically, so I may replace these with a nice set of shop bought rear sets or make some myself. The fitting of the seat cowl and seat needs some attention. You can see here that the cowl is touching the tank, which is causing the paint damage. Once I've got the cowl fitted properly, I'll be getting the tank and seat cowl repainted in the same colours. On the tail tidy, I'm going to make some brackets to mount the indicators. There's also some corrosion which I need to deal with. The rear axle mount I quite like, so I think I'm going to keep it. However, the grub screws here are rounded off, so I'm going to have to drill these out and fit some new ones. The seat is held on with two bolts, one here and one here, and they go through these two holes, but the only one that goes through a frame hole is the one here. The seat cowl is supposed to be fitted with 4 bolts, but all 4 are missing. Looking underneath the seat cowl, you can see the lithium battery, the Motogadget M-Unit and the wiring. The wiring's a bit dodgy and there's a risk that some of these positive wires could chafe on the sharper pieces of the frame and go to ground. The under tray is riveted and welded, so I'm going to cut this out and make a new one. I don't know if you can see this on the video, but part of the frame here looks like it's been bashed with a hammer on both sides to make it thinner to make the seat cowl fit. So I think I'm going to cut this piece of frame out and weld some new in so the seat cowl fits nicely. So that's it for today's video. If you would like to see more of my future videos and keep up to date with how the project's going, then please subscribe and click on the bell. Thanks very much. See you next time. Cheers.